2 years went by, and Pharaoh had a dream that he was standing on the bank of the Nile River. Then 7 fat, healthy-looking cows suddenly came up out of the river and began grazing along the banks. Then 7 other cows came up from the river, but these were very ugly and skinny. These cows went over and stood beside the fat cows. Then the thin cows that were ugly ate the fat cows. When this happened, Pharaoh woke up, but soon he fell asleep again, having a second dream. This time he saw 7 heads of grain on one stalk. Every kernel was well formed and plump. Suddenly 7 more heads of grain appeared on the same stalk, but these ones were shriveled and withered by the east winds. Then the thin heads swallowed up the plump heads. Pharaoh woke up again, realizing it was just a dream. The next morning Pharaoh was thinking about the dreams that he had, and became very concerned as to what they meant. So he called all the wise men and magicians of Egypt and told them about his dreams. But no one was able to tell him what they meant. Then finally, the king's cupbearer spoke up. "Today I have been reminded of my failure," he said. "When you had imprisoned me and your chief baker some time ago, one night the chief baker and myself both had a dream, and each of our dreams had a meaning. So we told the dreams to a young Hebrew man who was a servant of the captain of the guard. He told us what each dream meant, and everything happened exactly as he had explained. Pharaoh then sent for Joseph at once. Joseph was brought hastily from the dungeon. Joseph had a quick shave and change of clothes. Then he went to Pharaoh. Pharaoh then told Joseph about his dream. "Last night I had a dream, but none of these men can tell me what it means. But I heard that you can interpret dreams, and so that is why I have called you." Joseph replied, "It is beyond my power to do this, but God will tell you what it means and set you at ease." So Pharaoh then told him the dream. "I was standing on the Nile River bank," he said, "when suddenly 7 cows came up out of the water. They were healthy and fat, and they began grazing on the banks. But then 7 other cows came up out of the river too, but these were skinny and ugly. I have never seen such ugly animals in all of Egypt. These ugly, thin cows suddenly ate all the fat, healthy cows, but they stayed as ugly as before. Then I woke up. A little later I had another dream. This time there were 7 heads of grain on a single stalk. All were plump and full. Then from the same stalk came 7 withered heads shriveled from the east winds. Then the withered heads swallowed the plump heads. I've told these dreams to my magicians, but no one of them can tell me what it means." Joseph then replied, "Both dreams mean the same thing. God was telling you what he was about to do. The 7 fat cows and 7 plumps of grain both represent 7 years of prosperity. The 7 thin ugly cows and the 7 withered heads of grain represent 7 years of famine. This will happen just as I have described it, for God has shown you what he is about to do. The next 7 years will be filled with great prosperity throughout the land of Egypt, but after that there will be 7 years of famine, so great that all the prosperity will be forgotten about and wiped out. Famine will destroy the land. It will be so great that it will erase all the good years. Due to having the dream twice, this means that the matter has been decreed by God, and he will make these events happen soon. My suggestion is that you go and find the wisest man in Egypt and put him in charge of a nationwide program. Let Pharaoh appoint officials over the land and let them collect 1/5 of all the crops during the 7 years. Have them gather all the food and grain of these good years into royal storage houses and store it away so that there will be food in the cities That way there will be enough to eat when the 7 years of famine come. Otherwise, disaster will strike the land and everyone will die." Pharaoh and all his advisors received Joseph's suggestion, and they discussed who should be appointed for the job. Pharaoh went on to say, "Who could do it better than Joseph? For he is a man that is clearly filled with the Spirit of God." Then Pharaoh turned to Joseph and said, "Since God has revealed the meaning of the dreams to you, you are the wisest man in the land. I hereby appoint you to direct this project. You will organize all my people and manage my household, but only I will have a rank higher than yours." Pharaoh then put Joseph in charge of his entire land, then placed his own signet ring on Joseph's finger as a symbol of authority. He dressed him in beautiful clothing and placed a golden royal chain around his neck. He also gave Joseph the chariot of his second in command, and wherever he went the command was shouted, "Kneel down!" And Joseph was now in charge of all Egypt. Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I am the king, but no one in the entire land of Egypt will move a foot or hand without your approval." Pharaoh then renamed him Zephnath-Paneah and gave him a wife, a young woman named Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar. Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh. When Joseph left Pharaoh, he went to do a tour of inspection throughout the land. And surely enough, for the next 7 years were bumper crops everywhere. During those years, Joseph took a portion of all the crops that grew in Egypt and stored them for the government in nearby cities. When the 7 years went by, the granaries were overflowing. There was too much grain, like the sand on the seashores. People could not keep track of the amount. Before the arrival of the first famine, 2 sons were born to Joseph and his wife. Joseph named his oldest son Manasseh, for he said, "God has made me forget all my troubles and the family of my father." Joseph's second son was named Ephraim, for he said, "God has made me fruitful in this land of my suffering." The 7 years of plenty came to an end. The 7 years of famine had begun just as Joseph had predicted. There were crop failures in all the surrounding countries, but Egypt had plenty of grain in the storehouses. People began to starve throughout the land of Egypt. They pleaded with Pharaoh to give them food. He told them, "Go to Joseph and do whatever he tells you." With severe famine everywhere in the land, Joseph opened up the storehouses and sold grain to the Egyptians. People from surrounding lands also came to Joseph to buy grain, as the famine was severe throughout the land. When Jacob heard about the grain in Egypt, he told his sons, "Why are you standing around looking at each other? I have heard that there is grain in Egypt. Go on and buy some for us before we all starve to death." Joseph's 10 older brothers then went down to Egypt to buy grain. Jacob wouldn't allow Joseph's younger brother to go along with them, as he feared that he might get harmed. Jacob's sons finally arrived in Egypt along with others to buy some food, as the famine reached Canaan too. Due to Joseph being governor of all Egypt and in charge of all the sale of grain, it was to him that his brothers came. Before him they bowed low, with their faces in the ground. Instantly Joseph recognized them, but he pretended to be a stranger. He roughly demanded, "Where are you from?" They replied, "From the land of Canaan. We have come to buy grain." Joseph's brothers, however, did not recognize him. Joseph remembered the dreams he had many years before. He then said to them, "You are spies. You have come to see the vulnerability of our land." "No, my lord, we have come to buy food. We are all brothers and honest men, sir. We are not spies," they exclaimed. Joseph insisted, "Yes, you are. You have come to see how vulnerable the famine has made us." "Sir," they said, "there are 12 of us, and our father is in the land of Canaan. Our youngest brother is there with him, and one of our brothers are no longer with us." But Joseph continued to insist. As I have said, you are spies, and so I will test your story as follows. I swear by the life of Pharaoh that you will not leave Egypt unless your youngest brother comes here. Only one of you will go and get your brother. The rest of you I will keep bound in prison. That way, we will find out if your story is true or not. If it turns out that you do not have a younger brother, then I will know that you are spies." So they were all put in prison for 3 days. The third day had arrived, and Joseph said to them, "I am a God-fearing man. If you do as I say, you will live. We will see how honorable you really are. Only one of you will remain in prison. The rest of you will go home with grain for your families, but bring your youngest brother back to me. This is how I will know if you are telling the truth. If you are, I will then spare you." They all agreed to this. Speaking among themselves, they said, "This has all happened because of what we did to Joseph all those years ago. We heard his pleading and saw his terror and anguish, but we ignored him. This is why this trouble has come upon us." Reuben then said, "Did I not tell you not to do it? But you would not listen. And now we are going to die because we murdered him." Of course they had no idea that Joseph could understand them as he was standing there, as he had been speaking to them through an interpreter. Joseph then left the room to find a place to weep. Then a while after, he returned to speak to them some more. He then chose Simeon and had him tied up before their eyes. Joseph then ordered the servants to fill their sacks with grain. He also gave secret instructions to have each brother's money returned to the top of his sack. He also gave them provisions for their journey. They then loaded up their donkeys and headed homeward. When they stopped for the night, one of them opened his sack to get some grain to feed the donkeys. He found his money in the sack. "Look, my money is in my sack," he exclaimed to his brothers. This filled them with terror, and they said to each other, "What has God done to us?" They finally got home and went to their father in the land of Canaan, and they told him everything that had happened. As they emptied out the sacks, at the top of each sack was the bag of money paid for the grain. Terror gripped them, all including their father. "You have deprived me of my children," Jacob exclaimed. "Joseph disappeared and Simeon is gone too. And now you want to take Benjamin as well? Everything is going against me." Reuben then said to his father, "You may kill my 2 sons if I don't bring Benjamin back to you. I will be responsible for him." Jacob replied, "My son will not go with you, as his brother Joseph is dead, and he alone is left of his mother's children. If anything happens to him, you will bring my gray head down to the grave in deep sorrow."